Being recorded.
She wants her clinic to stay in.
You are so, you're so polite. I like you. You're very polite. You're very nice.
Hey, mute.
Make sure everybody mutes their microphone. We're going to start in a few minutes. Thank you, everybody, for your patience while we let everybody in.
No smiling girls. It's
I'm going to ask if everybody can turn off their camera except for our panelists. We are expecting over 140 people to attend the webinar tonight, so we want to make sure we can see all of our panelists clearly. So if you could turn off your camera and mute your microphone, that would be great. And if you are unsure how to do that, message me at Jesselyn and I will help you out. We're still letting folks in, so it's going to be a few minutes. Thank you for your patience. The captionist can post the stream link or the stream text link in chat, so you can access that as well. Thank you, Angie. Okay, let's get started. Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Jesselyn Ackerman Frank. I am the Director of Community and Civic Engagement with the Commission for the Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. My role tonight, well, I have several roles for tonight. One would be tech support, spotlighting everybody, but also providing visual and environmental descriptions. That was a request for tonight. So you'll notice me on screen the whole time explaining what the environment is and what the visual descriptions are. So before we begin, I will give some communication ground rules, so to speak. We will, if we have folks come on screen, we want to make sure that they are giving visual descriptions as well. So everybody has access to the webinar tonight. Please have patience with us as we spotlight folks. You'll notice we will spotlight the panelists one by one. So also we will be spotlighting the interpreters, and you will notice we will have both, we're using American Sign Language and spoken English tonight. So we will have the interpreters on the whole time. So your patience is very important and valuable tonight. The panel tonight will be wonderful. We have some fantastic deafblind individuals who have taken their time tonight to share their story and experiences with us. We have two amazing facilitators, Kaitlyn Mielke and also Patrick Vellia. They are also contractors with the commission, and so we want to thank them for giving us their time tonight and leading this panel. And with that, I'm going to do a visual description on myself. I'm a white woman. My hair is pulled back. It's blonde with some brown highlights. I'm wearing a dark blue jacket with a black shirt. I have a black background with a little bit of sun shining through, and I'm also wearing glasses. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and also to our facilitators. Hold on one moment. I'm going to spotlight Patrick. And I'm going to also add Kaitlyn. I'm adding Lori. Hold on one second. Hold on one second, Patrick. Hold on one second. We're trying to get everybody spotlit here. Hold on. I'm adding John as well. Okay, so we have all of the panelists here. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. Hi, everybody. I will be using sign language for now, and then I will be using spoken English throughout the panel. My name is Patrick Vellia. And so, like I said, I will be using, I know American Sign Language, but I will be changing language to spoken English. I'm a deaf-blind individual who uses tactile sign language, but I'm a little nervous tonight, so I'm going to be speaking English with using an ASL interpreter.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me tonight? Can you do spotlight and interpreter, please, so we have both me and an interpreter?
Yep, hold on one second. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Now we have benefit for the deaf community too, because I'm voicing tonight while having a tactile interpreter. And I have a sign language interpreter on my, well, on the screen, I'm on the left, but the interpreter is on the right. Okay, my name is Patrick Vellia, and I'm a deafblind contractor for the Minnesota Commission of the Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. I work in the civic engagement team with Jesselyn Ackerman Frank. And if I'm too fast, just let me know. Tonight, I have a black shirt on, short sleeves, and I'm a white, cisgender, gay man with brown hair and blue eyes. I might have forgotten to shave this morning, but I don't have much of a beard. And I have my mask covering my neck at the moment. I have two PT tactile interpreters, one providing on duty on my left side right now. The other one is in my background. And I also have a black background behind me, which is hanging on a wall. Okay, so I've finished my introduction short, and I'll move on to the other facilitator tonight, which is Kaitlyn Mielke. Your turn, Kaitlyn.
Good evening, everybody. I am Kaitlyn Mielke. I'm also a contractor with the Minnesota Commission for Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing, working with Anne and communication side of it. So I do a lot of content writing with Anne, and we're kind of the do anything type of project people. So they'll give a visual description. I'm a white woman with brown long hair. I'm wearing a black 3/4 length shirt. I have a black background as well, making sure that ease of communication is there. So I'm happy to see you all tonight and introduce you all to our panelists, starting with John. Good evening, everybody. My name is John. I'm one of the panelists for tonight. I will give a visual description background. I'm in front of a white wall. I'm wearing a dark gray long sleeve shirt. I have brown hair pulled back, also wearing glasses, black rimmed glasses. And I'm white individual, and I'm sitting next to a pillow. And Riss is next to me as well.
Okay, thank you, John. Now we'll introduce Lolly. Lolly is hard of hearing blind. So if you can do spotlight and interpreter when you spotlight Lolly, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lijewski. I will be voicing tonight. I am blind. I've been legally blind since birth and have lost most of my vision throughout my life. And so I identify as blind. I have moderate hearing loss and use hearing aids. That has it started out as mild for about 5 years in my late 50s. And then as I worked my way into my 60s, I about 2 to 3 years ago, transitioned into the moderate range of hearing loss. I'm a white woman. I have shoulder length brown hair. I have a floral headband on and a light colored shirt with flowers in the middle, flower applique. And I'm sitting in a chair that is kind of beige, gray beige, and then it has a blanket on the back that is also white and beige.
Thank you, Lolly. And so
Hi, Hi, Patrick. This is Jesselyn. I don't see Erin quite yet in the room, but I will let you know if they show up. Okay, great. Thank you.
Chat with you. Get her attention later and try and
So just send me a chat and let me know if they show up.
So now we've finished the introductions. And we'll move on to the first question. What is question one? Tonight, question one is, please describe your visual and your current usable, I don't know how to pronounce the word I use, residual, residual. I need a speech therapist. Anyway, current usable vision and hearing as it relates to the community at large, like how you would communicate with the person in the community. So, excuse me, I'm not used to talking so much. Okay. The community at large. So, for me, that would be medically I'm 5 feet and I have optic atrophy. If you have 10 Ziploc bags, you stack the bags and then you bring it up to your eyes and you try to see through those layers. Oh boy, you can barely see anything, I bet. I remember Anne from the commission tried it. And even the closest she got up to the TV, all she could see was blue. But for me, medically 5 feet, I can still see people coming into focus, but I wouldn't be able to identify you unless you're less than 2 feet away from me. Unless, for example, I can see my chef at work because she wears a different apron than everybody else. So I can identify her from a few more feet away. And normally I use a computer with very large magnification, almost 2 inches tall letters. But when I use my phone, I use a braille display. And for my hearing, I was diagnosed with hearing loss at age 4, but didn't start with interpreters until 6th grade. Those interpreters use signed exact English. So I didn't really learn ASL itself until college when I took it as a foreign language. And I graduated with a BA in that focus as a major in American Sign Language. So I can still understand New York accents, but I can't really understand Midwesterns and Southerners. Oh well, so I've become more dependent on sign language through tactile. Although in high school I could still do close visual, but I don't consider that professional anymore because staring 2 feet away from a woman's chest is not professional from an outsider's perspective. Like, that's not professional from an outsider's perspective. Like I explained in my last presentation, during misconceptions, in my topic on misconceptions in my last presentation on DeafBlind 101, what happened in school is all the interpreters, staff, and student interpreters were close to my age. So outsiders on campus who weren't in the major thought I was dating all my interpreters. Oh boy, I'm not running a harem. Anyway, we'll move on to Kaitlyn.
And Jesselyn's gonna spotlight Kaitlyn. And Patrick's off.
In chat.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kaitlyn. I was born deaf. We didn't know that I had a visual loss until about end of freshman year of college, which meant I was about 19, 20 years old. So that means I grew up with a deaf identity, and I didn't label myself as deafblind until much later, and that sort of took me aback. That transition to being deaf and then deafblind took a lot. And so then I sort of identified as deaf low vision, and so then I've started that journey ever since then. And so they knew that I was deaf since I was 1. I started learning sign language. Back then it was called total communication, which meant it was signing and spoken English at the exact same time. And eventually around 5th grade, I transitioned completely to using American Sign Language 100%. So that is my primary language. I will use spoken English if I'm around family or folks that don't know sign language, if I have to. But I was also identified as deafblind because I have Usher syndrome. And in my case, being born deaf and then becoming blind later, it was a slow residual loss of sight. I started struggling with seeing at night, probably around 10, 15 years old. And my family can all hear. So some of them, of course, can hear in the dark, and I could not. And so we didn't really think it was a thing until later on. Then I realized my vision was getting a bit narrow, and it was very gradual. I didn't even notice. And then one day it felt good, and the next day I felt like I couldn't see. My peripheral vision was lacking a bit. And of course I was just accommodating day by day. And I just knew that I would see better if I had a better light, or if I told somebody to move, or, so I just sort of accommodated it. And eventually it just got harder and harder and harder to accommodate. And I just eventually couldn't see a whole lot. And so even to this day, based on who I'm with or what the lighting is, or where people are standing, I can see or maybe cannot see a whole lot. So
This is Jesselyn. I'll turn Kaitlyn off and I will turn John on. Just a moment, please.
hello, everybody. This is John. I was born deaf and blind. I also have Usher syndrome. I am able to see as long as there's good lighting, but even then it's still pretty challenging. It's pretty blurry. And I really only see clearly in about a circle or more of a tunnel, so to speak. So, but my primary mode of communication is American Sign Language, and I've been using that since I can even remember. I do not use spoken English at all. It is 100% American Sign Language with my family, at school, with my friends. I use interpreters out in public. And yeah, that's my language.
This is Jesslyn. I will turn off John and turn on Lolly.
This is Lolly. I was born with Leber's congenital amaurosis, which is in the family of retinitis pigmentosa, but it exhibits at birth rather than in your 20s and 30s. And so I was legally blind, but I used corrective lenses throughout school. I was able to read some print, small, mostly large print, but in some cases, even some small print in textbook. And sorry, I was waiting for the link to be read out. So I was able to read some print, but I also was taught to read Braille in about 3rd grade. So I understood and could read both and went through school primarily with some vision, started to lose vision. I have multiple conditions. So while I have Leber's, I also developed cataracts, which is common for the condition that I have. There's sort of a different type of cataract, but that happened. And then a little later in also early 20s, I developed a condition which mirrored having diabetic hemorrhages in my eyes. And so that also influenced what I could see, and some things happened around that, which meant that I lost most of what I had in one eye, which I did not have a lot of vision in that eye to begin with. So the other one has probably, my other eye, my left eye, has been my primary source of vision through most of my adult life. And that has diminished as I've gotten older as well, to the point where now things are blurry. I can see shapes and shadows. I can see some color, but I have a field of less. It's not even measurable at this point. They say hand motion or finger motion, and then light perception in the other eye. And then, as I said in my introduction, I come later to hearing loss. About, I think in my mid to late 50s, I noticed that I wasn't hearing as well. So started getting some baseline hearing tests, and at that point was diagnosed with mild loss. And then I think it was just before COVID hit, I was enjoying myself at a number of different concerts and different venues, and noticed after a summer of that I lost additional hearing and kind of moved into the moderate range. So then I started using hearing aids, and have been using hearing aids since, now for about 2 years, I'd say. That's pretty much it.
I'll turn Nolly off and spotlight Kaitlyn. We're switching interpreters at this time. Okay, Tara will be switching to D. Are we good? Yes. This is Kaitlyn here. If you see me reach my screen, it's because I'm trying to click and make sure that I should keep it muted, but yes, I'm trying to sign. We'll transition to the next question. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your background. We will focus on communication in our next question. Tell us what kind of communication you use with your friends, family, coworkers, and out in the community. Do you use caption, signing? What kind of communication access do you use? For me, Kaitlyn, I use American Sign Language. I don't use Protactile just yet, but I still have enough, because I still have enough vision to use both. Now remember, I have my central vision, is I can use that, especially if somebody comes in front of me. If they're to my side, I have to ask them to move over in order to see what they're signing. For work, I work remotely most of the time, so I use email, which is my primary mode of communication, because it evens our playing field, basically. Once in a while, we'll be using a video phone, video relay, because then I can sign on a screen and that person can call a hearing person. But really, I'm not a big fan of that, because it can be a hit or miss with the interpreters. Sometimes I can see them great, but sometimes it might be too dark, or the background isn't very well. And it can be a difficult situation, and oftentimes they have to switch to other interpreters. Often I use an IP relay that is on the laptop. Do you know they used to have in the old days, they have TTYs, same concept, but through the internet. I like it because I can type everything I want to send, and I have some time to catch up, or I can print the conversation if I need to take notes as I go along. To communicate with hearing people, I bring in an interpreter. For a regular ASL interpreter, and I don't use a Protactile at this time, or maybe we write back and forth, or we can use an app on a phone, where you can send a text message and it can be increased in size. Those are different types of communication access that I use. Next person is John.
We will take Kaitlyn off the screen and then spotlight Patrick.
My turn before our panelists. Okay, so how do I communicate? With my talk. Okay, so how do I communicate? Well, like I said, I was diagnosed at age 4 with hearing loss. So I could still understand speech with my family who barely signs. Even in the pool without hearing aids, I could understand if you talk loud enough. But by my 20s, you really had to sign to understand you, but I could still understand Dad oddly enough, but not Mom. So when I was in junior high, Mom took ASL 1 and passed it with an A. But like I said, my school had me using Signs Exact English. So Mom tried to take ASL 2. But I use Signs Exact English. So you know, like hearing and hearing. Too much of a conflict. Have, had, has, have. I don't know the difference in the ASL. So what about failed ASL 2? But she still knows her finger spelling. Even with me gone for 3 years, she can still finger spell in her 70s. I was on. Let me back up from my introduction because I seem to have forgotten some background for you. I was born and raised in New York, and I graduated from mainstream high school in 2006. Then moved to North Carolina in 2006 with my parents, my siblings, as I'm the baby of 5, 3 brothers and 1 sister. I mean, the other way around. 3 sisters and 1 brother. And I lived there for 13 years, then moved here in 2019 to start working. So where was I? Okay, so I moved here in 2019. So Mom, and I'm recently visited, she can still finger stamp. But I tend to use sign language when I'm with the deaf and interpreter and SSP community. I tend to use sign language if the person knows sign language. But at work, my chef knows finger spelling fine. Everybody else knows. 70% of my team is Spanish speaking. There's a communication barrier right there since I don't know much Spanish. I don't know much Spanish beyond hola, ¿cómo estás? También. But, so I know enough to do the same sentence in bilingual. Hola, buenos días. Hello, good morning. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? That helps me because I don't know which team member is Spanish. And they can respond through gestures. But otherwise, I would use my iPad if the person actually knows English. The person actually knows English, like my winter job, the chaps don't know sign language. So they type on my iPad and I would read it in large print and then respond verbally. So distance communication, I tend to use email, chat, online chat, or I can't use VP at all because I can't see a person signing on the screen. So if I must, and absolutely must, I would use IP relay, but I hate it with a passion. Why? Because the operators use all caps, which slows me down. There's really no way to force them to use regular sentence case. Oh well. So I think that's all for me. And we'll move on to John.
And Patrick, Erin has joined the room. So they can answer a few of the last questions. And this is Jesselyn. I'm going to turn off Patrick and we will spotlight John.
John here. I typically use ASL to communicate and Protactile as well on my back to get the environmental information. Because my vision is a bit blurry, it's hard to say tell me and notice the environment to me. So I use Protactile for that purpose. Text messages, email as well to communicate. I know how to read Braille, but I don't use it for communication purposes with other people just yet. Potentially in the future, if I become fully blind, I may. With my family, we typically communicate in American Sign Language. Sometimes I just depend on them to interpret for me, or maybe other hearing person can interpret for them. I'll pass it on now.
This is Jesselyn. I'm going to turn off, or I'm going to unspotlight John. And I'm now going to spotlight Lolly.
This is Lolly. So I primarily use voice, and I'm not I do not know sign language. Again, I've come to hearing loss later in life, and my primary disability most of my life has been blindness, has been vision loss. So I identify more as a person with dual sensory loss. And I do, as I mentioned earlier, I do read Braille. I use it every day to mark things in my home to be able to, for example, use my microwave or use the washing machine, that sort of thing. I'm not a fluent Braille reader, though I learned it early. If you don't use something, you often lose it. I haven't lost it totally, but I haven't been a proficient reader in the sense that I don't use Braille to read books. I do use a screen reader, both on my phone and on my computer. And in that way, I communicate primarily in, using the computer or using the phone. But the screen reader helps me know what's on the screen, what's being written on the screen. And so that's the other way that the other method I have to communicate. Thanks.
This is Jesselyn. I'm turning off Lolly's screen or unspotlighting Lolly. And next we'll spotlight Patrick. And Patrick, want to let you know that Erin, their screen is on now and they're in the room.
Thank you, Jesselyn, for informing me that Erin just arrived. Okay. Before I introduce Erin, quick comment to Lolly. Yes, I do the same thing with Braille in my home, but I don't do it with clothes yet. But for my kitchen, yeah, like for spice bottles, well, I transferred into a Pyrex, P-H-Y-R-E-X, Pyrex glass jar to the top, so I can put a label around the edge, around the side, and it fits, so I can read the label. Oh, this is garlic, this is ground ginger, and then find and open it and use a ladle measuring spoon, and it's easy. Anyway, our final panelist just arrived a few minutes ago. She's from North Carolina, here on Zoom, and the state librarian. So I tend to call her Madam Library. So,
And we've just added Erin to the screen.
I'm,
And she,
I'm sorry, this is Erin. I should have checked my email. My name is Erin Bradford. So sorry for being late. I live in North Carolina.
in fact,
I am deafblind, and I grew up as a hard of hearing person. I'm blind in my left eye, and I use my voice as well as sign language for work as a librarian in the State Library in North Carolina. And I'm learning Braille as well.
thank you, Erin. Can you explain how your current usable vision and hearing, which was question 1. And question 2 was how you communicate in the community at large. Like if you're going to a restaurant or with friends.
Very good. For me, my vision, how do I say this? On the left side, I have no central vision at all. Only peripheral. On my right eye, I do have a central vision, but no peripheral.
Thank you. So we'll move
So
on.
I don't have any of that in my right eye. I'm good in the left eye. Now I forgot, I'm sorry, Patrick, I forgot what the second question was. Communication with the community at large, is that the question?
Second question was how you communicate in the community at large.
Patrick, can you explain a bit more for Erin? The second question, please.
How do you communicate at the community at large? Like you go to a restaurant, how do you communicate with the cashier or a waiter? Or you have your customers at the library, how do you communicate with them?
If I, as an employee, as a librarian, which means I'm working with the public, as well as other staff in the library. Mostly I communicate with the staff through email, as well as another program called Teams. During meetings in the past, someone would come with me and would type the information for me about what was being said. But because of COVID, all of those meetings have become virtual on Zoom. So now I use the relay system for the conference codes captioning. I prefer that because it's very good and it understands a lot, much better with relay. With the public, at my job, I might use a paper and pen. I cannot use white paper because it hurts my eyes terribly. So I have my own notepad or notebook that I use, which is a lighter yellow. And I use a blue pen to write with. I would tell the person, hello, I am deaf. I cannot hear you, but if you please write down, we can communicate that way. Most people are fine with that without any problem. There are a few people, however, that try to speak louder, and I explain, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. And if they still try to speak or continue to speak, I will grab another coworker and explain to that coworker the situation. And then I will have that coworker come with me to help me out. Now, outside of work, I prefer to use sign language. However, I do use my voice on occasion. In the past, going to maybe a deaf event, I would use my voice and sign at the same time. People would tell me to stop talking, which is funny. So I'm learning how to not use my voice while I sign.
Thank you, Erin. Now,
Patrick, if you hold a moment, Patrick, we're going to be switching interpreters. Just a moment, please.
Your interpreters, not my interpreters. Okay. Okay. So you feel all right? Good. Okay. Yeah. Just two quick sentences for Erin's comments. Reliant conference captioning is available in some states through their state relay services, which is contracted. Used to be contracted through Sprint, now T-Mobile. And that service you can book a few days, I think 24 hours in advance. And it's free for the company that books the service. So, but it has to be booked from an area code that's provided by that service, and then captioner can dial into the Zoom meeting. That's how it works. It's not available here in Minnesota, so we're stuck with, who has a question? Erin. Yeah.
Patrick, Erin has her hand up and is on screen.
This is Erin, and in North Carolina, it's a 48-hour request period ahead of time.
Thanks for correcting me. I couldn't remember as it's been 3 years. But we don't have it here in Minnesota, so we have to book cart captioning or other types of captioning services. Anyway, thank you, Erin. So we'll move on to the question 3. What challenges do you face in the community? I'll start myself.
This is Jesselyn. We'll turn off Erin at this time.
We have, okay. Okay. So question 3, what challenges do we face in the community? Well, before I moved here, I could, and when I had access to the iPhone and the GPS, it was difficult to navigate the community. And my orientation and mobility teacher back in 2007 claimed it wasn't safe. For example, when I first moved to North Carolina, we thought of having me use the express bus to get into the city for community college, which didn't stop at the transit hub. So I would have to walk at 7 in the morning, 3 blocks. But both my parents and O&M teacher felt it wasn't safe. But I moved here and I feel pretty safe doing it. But I even navigate the community by GPS, though that doesn't always work. For example, the Massage MD was actually across the street. And a few years ago, I went to Raleigh and I tried to follow the GPS because I had 2 hours to kill before I went to see a movie. So I tried to follow the GPS to go to Chick-fil-A for dinner. The problem, GPS wanted me to cross over railroad tracks. I didn't think that was safe, so I went a different way. And I went walking and walking and walking for over an hour. And Erin was able to follow me and find my friends, find a map drawing a line as I moved. And apparently I passed Chick-fil-A twice. But finally, my nose picked up the smell of French fries. And I walked into and I checked, oh yes, this is Chick-fil-A. I walked up to her and made my order. But it's one challenge. And another challenge is communicating and like food shopping. I have to depend on SSP if I'm going in person. Because sometimes the staff at the store are complete idiots. Like one time I go up to customer service and request assistance for the food department. And they give me somebody in a wheelchair who doesn't feel safe to work with me. So they call somebody else. And then that person is from a completely different department. And he's trying to help me find food in the food department. But he's looking and looking and looking. We can't find this chicken. So now we have Shipt, SHIPT. And I order all the time. But Instacart, I don't like. Why? I can't have interpersonal communication with the shopper. So with Shipt, when the shopper starts, they would text you. Then if I can't find something, I'll let them know that I want to add something where I forgot something. Or if they can't find a product, we will negotiate a change for a substitute. Sometimes they'll send me a picture and I explain I can't see pictures. But one time last week, the person didn't understand that, just kept asking me, but didn't explain the picture. So I texted it to another person, a friend of mine. They told me which one for the balsamic vinegar. So that's a few challenges I face in the community. Now it's John's turn. if you can keep it a little short because we're running out of time.
Patrick, I'm turning your screen off. Would you like Erin? Or would you like to follow our list?
John first. John, Valley, Erin.
So if I'm following the list, which means Kaitlyn would be next. So I have spotlighted Kaitlyn.
This is Kaitlyn. For challenges, I will talk about two different areas. In terms of navigating, working with people, and then navigating, working amongst the environment. So when communicating with people, my situation is a bit unique because when people see me, I don't look like a deafblind person, right? So I don't use a cane. I don't have a dog. So those are the typical signs, so to speak, of a deafblind person, but I don't have those things because I can read fine, sign fine, so to speak. It's just at night I have trouble, my peripheral has trouble. So people assume that I can see more than I actually can. So for example, people will be on my side and they'd be waving to me, I can't see them. And then they'll finally come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, why didn't you look at me? And I was like, I didn't see you. And so my brain is a bit tricky because it's trying to convince me that I can see more than I actually can. So for example, in front of me, I see okay if I'm using a camera. So basically it's like what the camera sees, I see. So the camera does not have a peripheral vision. So therefore I don't either. So basically I'm using an analogy. So it's basically what a camera can see is what I can see. So, but I'm not fully blind and I'm not fully deaf. So there's a spectrum, as we know. In deafness, there's deaf and hard of hearing. But with blind, it's either fully blind or maybe low vision or what I call hard of seeing. Haha, just like joke on hard of hearing. But so that's sort of, people do not often understand that. And people will comment that during the day I could see them fine, but at night I couldn't see them at all. And that's actually true because at night there's no light and during the day there's much more light and I'm able to see a bit more. And also I can't drive at night. I can potentially drive during the day, but honestly, I don't want to feel accountable because that's a lot of responsibility. I don't want to cause an accident or drive over an animal or a kid. So it's just best to not start driving than start driving and then have to give up driving later, because then it's harder to have to give it up. But if you've never started and you don't know what you're missing, then that's a bit easier. And I didn't understand that until now. So those are some challenges that I face, definitely. And in terms of environmental challenges, so remember my camera analogy. Now, if I am walking, I cannot see below me. So I may trip over a curb. If people are running or walking really fast, I may not be able to see them. And if you've read Harry Potter, you know how the magic people just disappear, right? I feel like that's what happens in my life. Like people just appearing out of nowhere without any warning. And I want people to give me some warning because I feel like they just come out of nowhere. Or if I'm outside and I go into a building and if the outside is really bright, then I'm great. And then I go into a building and I feel like complete temporary blindness because I have to adjust, my eyes will have to adjust. And it takes me about a minute, or excuse me, it takes other people about a minute. It takes me a good 5 minutes to adjust my eyes and then see clear enough to continue walking into the building. And sometimes I will use my sighted friends as a bulldozer. And so I say, oh, do you mind just walk in front of me? And they say, no problem. And then they're the ones that trip over the curb. And I say, great, thanks thanks for letting me know that it's a curb or a wet floor sign. So then I don't feel bad because I'm always the one that falls. So if the sighted person falls, I feel a bit better. So outside requires a bit more planning and navigating. I can't just go out and enjoy the day. I have to truly figure out what I'm doing, point A to point B, and how do I get there and what is it going to take? And if I need to be driven, I have to ask somebody. And unfortunately, where I live, there's not a lot of public transport. So I have to walk and there's also not a lot of sidewalks. And I also have balance problems. So it's a job to try and navigate daily life. If I'm out in the city, it's much easier because there's public transport and there's buses and light rails and a lot more options. But out in the suburbs, not so much, a little bit limited options for travel. So those are definitely my challenges. And I always say I'm a day vampire. I always joke because I get home. I always have to get home before it's dark because remember, I can't see in the dark. So I always say that I'm a daytime vampire. And if we see the sun setting, then I have to hurry up and get home or hurry up and get into a building with light. So I have to avoid the dark. So those are my examples of people and environment challenges. Next person, please.
I'm turning Kaitlyn off at this time. This is Jesslyn. I'll move on to let everybody else know. Please type your questions directly to me because it does interrupt the screen readers when you send it to everyone. The time is now 7. I will spotlight John.
Hi, everybody. This is John. So some challenges that I have out in the community. I have a few comments on that. Most of the time when I go out to places, they're not always deafblind friendly because the lighting is too dark or, there's just different things that are just not very easily accessible for me. In my area where I live, there's no metro transit. There's no bus or anything like that. So it's very challenging to commute. I have to use somebody else's, have to use a ride share or ask for a ride. That's always challenging. I'm also quite the introvert. So I'm not a social butterfly. I don't like to socialize, especially with new people that maybe don't know sign language or I can't really communicate with. I'm not very interested in that. It's challenging for me. I'm also quite tall. So same thing, I can't see beneath me. And so I do often fall or accidentally step on something like my pet's tail or something I step in. So that's challenging too. And when talking with folks, sometimes I miss what they say because their signing space is too big and I have a very limited stream of sight. So if people are not signing in that space, then I tend to miss what they're signing.
This is Jesslyn. I will turn John's screen off. And now I will spotlight Lolly. Ask Lolly to please unmute.
We go. This is Lolly. So let's see. In terms of the community, being in the community and challenges, I'd say transportation is number one. Getting places, I use either paratransit using Metro Mobility, or I use a car service that's like a cab, but it's a little bit more, slightly more expensive. The reason I use the car service is that oftentimes I've experienced denials or refusals from cab drivers because I use a guide dog. Same with the Lyft or Uber. And over the pandemic, I learned that that stress was just something I didn't want to have to deal with. So I'll pay a little bit more for a service I know isn't going to deny me. In terms of I really, I do ask friends or family for rides, mostly friends. My family doesn't live, they live in the metro area, but most of them are not close to me. And I've also learned over time that mostly I want to try to do as much as I can on my own. So occasionally I'll ask a friend for a ride for a specific task if it's something that I can't do well using other types of transportation. Shopping, I use a combination of online and in-store. And usually if I'm in the store, I get assistance from someone, say I go to Target, and they do offer shopping assistance. I usually work with the staff that's assigned to do that. And for the most part, it goes pretty well, as long as the person who's assisting has good English skills. I've had the experience where that's not the case, and then it can be kind of challenging. Because my primary sensory loss is vision, I use both a guide dog and a cane. I use a guide dog primarily when I'm out and about. When I'm around my building, I live in a condo building, and so when I'm navigating around my building, for the most part, I use a cane. Occasionally I'll take my dog with, but they're usually short trips. So people often get confused because they wonder where the dog is if they see me with a cane. And sometimes I have the energy to explain and sometimes I don't. And then let's see, doing activities, going to restaurants, or sometimes I'll ask if there's a Braille menu, but I actually, and I appreciate it when there is, and often I will take them and read them. But if I'm with someone, with a friend, say for dinner, and that friend is sighted, I'll often ask them to read the menu for two reasons. One is that it's faster for me if they do it, and they're going to do it anyway. So it's kind of a social experience in that way. I think another challenge often is people wanting to interact with my dog. I'm on my 7th guide dog, and so that's not an unfamiliar challenge for me. And it also depends on the time I have as to how much information I'll give. I don't always feel that I have to be the educator. Sometimes I will. If I have time, I'll answer questions. But most often people want to pet the dog. I would actually say kids are better than adults. They seem to understand, or being taught, they seem to be taught in school that they shouldn't interact with a service dog, and adults seem to feel more entitled to do that. So I have more problems with adults that way. So those are some of the challenges. And then again, just with hearing loss, I'd say most of that happens for me when I'm in crowded places. I'm still fortunately at the level where my technology helps me. And I have different programs for different locations, like, outside or in a restaurant or at home. And those are greatly helpful at this point. So I do definitely use different programs within my hearing aids to be able to hear depending on the location that I'm in. Thanks.
Turning Lily's screen off at this time. I believe now we will spotlight Erin.
Hi, everybody. Just thinking of what challenges I have. And I saw that another panelist, what their challenges were, and I was thinking about my own. Someone mentioned about restaurants. And sometimes I go to restaurants and I ask for a larger print or a Braille menu. And if they don't have those, then I will leave. Because why stay and give them my business if they can't accommodate me, or if I can't even understand what I'm going to have to eat that day? If I'm with friends or family, then I will stay and I will ask what the choices are. And one thing in particular about me, in 2020, had a huge impact on me. COVID especially. Because my vision had a severe loss during that time. And I lived in a place that I loved. I've been there for 12 years. And part of the reason that I love it's because it has a small shopping center just across the street. And since 2020, I would walk to that shopping center typically all of the time, like every weekend. And it was a new challenge for me is that I couldn't do that during COVID. And there was 8 lanes of traffic, and that's clearly not safe. And I only had 30 seconds to walk across 8 lanes of traffic, which is impossible. That would be very hard. And so now I stay home most of the time or go to work. And so a big challenge now is my vision loss and figuring out how to work with that vision loss and how to navigate that. My job has been wonderful. We do have the closed captioning TV, the CC TV at work. And when I'm at the reference desk, I ask for the CCTV, and that helps a lot as well. But prior to 2020, I didn't use it much. But now I'm using it almost daily. And I think my biggest challenge is just feeling very lonely. Because I can't cross the street to go to the mall, and transportation is very limited. So yeah, that's me.
This is Jesslyn. I'll be turning off Erin's screen. I think we are turning off Tara, and we'll switch and turn on the interpreter D. It is 7:13 at this time. I will spotlight Kaitlyn. I also see Patrick's hands up. I will spotlight Patrick as well. Patrick, can you say that again, please? Patrick said, can I skip 4 and go directly to number 5 because time is of the essence? This is Kaitlyn. Patrick, would you like me to ask question number 5? This is Patrick. Go ahead. Just skip number 4 and go directly to number 5. Thank you. And then I will take number 6. I will wait for Jesslyn.
Okay, this is Jesslyn. I will take Patrick off screen. Go ahead, Kaitlyn.
Thank you. This is Kaitlyn here. The next question is, what advice do you have for the people here if they happen to meet a deaf-blind community, a person out in the community? What would you prefer them to know how to communicate with you? This is Kaitlyn. For me, now remember my story about the spectrum. It's just not a one-size-fit-all situation. Don't assume anything. Look at the person. They may or may not be fully blind or fully deaf. They may use a cane, they may use a dog, they may use glasses, they may not be any of the above. So throw all of those thoughts out and look at the person themselves. For an example, when I meet somebody, they have no idea that I'm deafblind. I might tell them if they could move a little bit closer to be right in front of me so I could see them rather than be on my side. Or if the person is trying to get my attention, try not to grab me because I'll jump and I might slap them. Would you like that? I highly doubt it. So I suggest a light touch or a tap and wait for us to see what or who is there and then start our conversation. Oftentimes, I might miss the first couple things because I'm really trying to track. If I see a person, I'm looking at their hand first and then wait until I look at your face so I can get the information. Now, that is just me and my preference. Other people's preference certainly is different. Maybe you can ask the person how they would like to communicate. How would they like for you to get their attention? If something happens, how to address it? What type of results would they prefer to get from you? Better ask than assume. Plus, maybe what works in one situation may not always work in another. Remember, outside in the daylight, it might be great, but overnight, after the sun goes down, I could ask the person if we could move to more lighted space, or if we could even use a flashlight, or maybe somebody could bring one so I don't have to bring it myself. Maybe because my battery might be gone. If they have one, that's great. Teamwork is key. Ask, don't assume. I will turn it over now.
Okay, well, I will unspotlight Kaitlyn and then I will spotlight Patrick. Jesslyn, go ahead. Go ahead, Patrick. You are spotlight. Go ahead and answer the last question there.
What would you like me to do, Jesslyn? This is Patrick.
Go ahead and answer question number 5. What advice do you have for the audience who's watching for deafblind individuals and seeing out them on the community?
Oh, we skipped number 4 and then went directly to number 5. Oh, I see it. Now it's my turn. This is Patrick. Sorry about that. I thought you had a question for me and I didn't know what was happening. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay. So what advice? My advice is very similar to Kaitlyn's. And my like you would gently tap the shoulder on the upper arm, but don't grab the hand. No. Don't grab the hand. But especially those who have mental trauma, mental scars, they will have a PTSD attack if you try to roughly grab the person. No. And also don't assume the person is totally blind, totally deaf. That's one problem I always come up with, and it's really annoying. There's only 1% that's completely blind, completely deaf. All right, so to save time, I will move on to John.
I will unspotlight Patrick and spotlight John.
This is John. A few suggestions of advice. Some people assume that deafblind means, again, fully deaf and fully blind, that they can't see at all. It varies across the board. Some people can still hear some, and some people can still see some. Again, it's very different with everybody. Never assume. Some people also like to come in front of you and wave their hands, and that's a little bit offensive for a deafblind person. So some advice for you would be to tap them on the shoulder. It just makes the whole process easier. I also suggest don't feel sorry for that deafblind person. Really, we're fine. We don't need any pity from anybody. I think that's all I have. I'll turn it over.
I will take off John from spotlight and then I will put on Erin. No, excuse me, I will spotlight Lolly. Lolly, you are on. Please unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting.
There you go. Yep.
Okay, there we go. This is Lolly. As far as communications go I'd say that for me, because I'm still have, my hearing is still at a level where again, my technology works for me. That pretty much just, approaching me and talking to me is fine. I also agree. I think that often our physical boundaries are, and they're either violated or people just assume that they can touch you. So I think it's always best to ask. I find when people are trying to guide, they want to do one of two things. What I call steering, where they put their hand on your back, the back of your neck or whatever, and kind of steer you, which is one of my pet peeves. I hate that. I want to be asked if they can touch me, and then I will show them how to do sighted guide, if that's appropriate for the situation. Often people will try to, if they are trying to guide, they'll take my hand, which then the sighted guide position puts the guide in front of you a little bit, and that's a helpful thing. So I try to direct them in that way. I'm trying to think of other situations or other, well, I've had this happen where people have tried to pick up my dog's harness or a leash, and that's absolutely not acceptable. I liken someone trying to take my dog's harness from me like someone who's trying to take the steering wheel from a driver. And it's a very dangerous thing. So it's something I don't have much patience for at all. And the other thing that can sometimes happen when especially if I'm out in the community and I need assistance or need direction, is people will get on the dog side, which confuses the dog. They walk on the left typically, and so the person who's assisting or guiding or giving direction should be on the right. And I usually will explain that. It's sometimes even visually apparent if they're walking on the left, of the dog, and the dog keeps kind of, sometimes I've had dogs that'll actually kind of maneuver the person out of their way, which is really funny. That's pretty much it.
All right, Lolly, I will turn your spotlight off and then I will spotlight Erin.
Hello again. This is Erin. Everyone I speak with and everything they said, I agree with. Allow the person be themselves. There's nothing else I really need to say.
Okay, Erin, I will unspotlight you, and then this is Jesselyn. Patrick, just to let you know, we are at 7:25 and we have a lot of different questions, but I've noticed they're pretty similar to some of the questions in question 4, which would be, what do you recommend the state of Minnesota to work on to improve quality of life for deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing individuals? Not necessarily talking about SSPs or co-navigators, but other things working with deafblind individuals. There's many questions in the chat directly related to that question. Do you want to maybe take a few minutes to address that a little bit?
This is Patrick, I think.
And I just added Patrick on the screen.
So we'll go back to question 4 because most people are asking questions related to that one. So question 4, as Jesselyn just said, what advice do you have for the state of Minnesota? Since this audience here is mostly the state of Minnesota employees and the general public. So what advice do we have? Not necessarily related to SSPs or stuff like that, because that's what we always hear about. So for me, I would advise to improve the transit system. But for example, in Chicago, we already have access to transit passes through the Apple Pay. So when we get on the bus, if we used Apple Pay, like I would go at the vending machine, when the payment is accepted, the phone vibrates. Right now, we use a transit card on a pedestal and you use near field communication, but I don't always hear the beep. And if I don't have my hearing aids on, I'm not going to hear it at all. So how would I know the payment was taken? I don't know. And other improvements could add the transit gates. So if the train is coming by, not only for the cars, but also for the crosswalks. So if there's a train coming, then the transit gates should, then the train gate should close to prevent, like in an amusement park, when the ride is running, the gates can't open, like for the roller coasters. Same idea, but use them for the crosswalks, so that way a person can't just cross even if the train's coming, like here in downtown. Because while in St. Paul, you've gone a little ahead of Minneapolis, because in St. Paul, you have EPS signals for all the crosswalks for the green line. And here in downtown, 5th Street, not really, on the west side. But on the east side, close to US Bank, yeah, you have them for the light rail. Excuse me. So, move on to Kaitlyn.
Okay, now I will let you know, Patrick, we are at 7:29.
So
This is Kaitlyn. I would keep it short. I will explain what I call the spork example. Not really a fork, but not really a spoon. The spork. And how does that relate to the state of Minnesota? Let me explain. With resources and services, do I go to the deaf service area or do I go to a blind service area? Where do I go? Am I more deaf or more blind? An example, if I want to apply for vocational rehabilitation, VR, I might go to a deaf person. They say, oh, no, blind people are over there. They'd say, and when I go to a blind group, they'd say, no, you're not blind enough. Go over to the deaf area. So eventually though, yes, I will qualify to be under the blind group, but not at this point, I don't. So services and forms, you either have a yes or no option, but there's no gray area. Where is that? Because many of us are in the middle. Not everything is either a yes or a no. That's one example. Spork. I'm not a spork.
Great, I will turn Patrick's screen on. Or excuse me, I will turn off Kaitlyn's screen and turn on John. John, if you have anything to add, we're at 7:30, so we want to add, or we want to respect everybody's time tonight. So maybe be brief if you have anything to add.
This is John. Can you say that again, Jesselyn?
Sorry, Jesselyn's here. I just wanted to let you know that we are at 7:30. And so we asked the rest of the panelists to be very brief because we do need to close soon to respect everybody's time. So do you want the question again? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, please.
What do you recommend for the state of Minnesota and how they can make improvements for the quality of life for the deaf-blind individuals?
Got it. Thank you. This is John. I would suggest to add for other services, deaf, blind services. Again, there's no services for deaf, blind specifically. There's no option to pick a deaf, blind option. I would ask to add that as a deaf, blind option. I think that's all I have.
Okay, great. I will turn you off and then I'll spotlight Lolly. Lolly, you are up.
Yes, this is Lolly. So I don't know that I have an answer in terms of the state's service offerings. I agree with Kaitlyn's explanation about I'm not one or the other, I'm both. But where I found a need is in terms of audiology, in particular on understanding, and I particularly talking about experience that I've had, having to do a lot of education around as a person who identifies primarily as blind, around what echolocation is, and also around what my hearing aids need to be able to do for me to compensate for that loss, because my hearing has been primarily the way that I navigate the world. So for me, it's not so much about right now, at least state offerings, as it is doing more education in terms of both the audiologists and manufacturers of hearing aids to, for example, I have a box that I charge my hearing aids in at night, and there's a light that tells you if the connection is made between the hearing aid and the charger, and it flashes if it's not, but there's no tone. So for me, I have no idea if they're charging enough, and I'll take one out in the morning and it hasn't charged. So that's a thing that's a simple fix, but it's not within the state's purview to do. I guess the biggest thing would be education in that vein. Thanks.
Great, Lolly, I'll take you off and then I'll spotlight Erin last. Erin will be the last panelist to answer.
Hello, this is Erin. I don't live in Minnesota, so it's hard for me to say, but in North Carolina, I started learning protactile communication from the state services for the deaf. They work to teach protactile, and I love it. I'm hoping that Minnesota starts something, but if not, I would suggest Minnesota start with some trainings for protactile services. Sorry about that. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Erin. We'll take you off screen. And I will add Patrick and Kaitlyn back on.
Okay.
And Patrick, just to let you know, we are now at 7:35. Plus we have,
Let's to open the floor for questions. We've got 20 minutes left.
we can do that, sure. So I'm reading through all of the questions. We can start with question 1. Dee will come down, Tara will come up. So for Patrick and Kaitlyn, first question. We have a lot of them.
Sorry.
So somebody asked, what age did you identify, or that you were identified as being deafblind? What age did you learn American Sign Language, or was your first exposure to American Sign Language? So 2 questions in one. When were you first identified as deafblind? And when was your first exposure to American Sign Language, at what age?
Patrick speaking. Hey, Jesselyn, you might let us save the chat so that way we can compile an FAQ later. Anyway, to answer the question, I was diagnosed with vision loss at 6 months old since I was conceived as fraternal twins. And I was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. So at 6 months old, I was diagnosed with vision loss and diagnosed with hearing loss at 4. So in elementary school, my deaf and hard of hearing teacher, or hearing itinerant as it was called back then, would taught me the manual alphabet. But I started sign language interpreting and signed exact English in 6th grade. But I was encouraged to use my voice rather than sign, which is why I'm taking on such a role tonight, because I suspect that's common in the K-12. For example, the interpreter would interpret, but I'm not allowed to sign myself. So how do I pick up my expressive skills? The interpreter also had to take time to teach me sign language, which is double the role of what they're supposed to do. Okay. I answered that, so next time.
This is Jesselyn. I will turn off Patrick and let Kaitlyn respond.
Hi, this is Kaitlyn. So I will answer the first part about my deaf-blind identity. I was 20, because remember, I was born deaf, but formally diagnosed with what type of Usher syndrome was actually last summer. So it's taken over 15 years to completely identify what's going on and identify my deaf blindness. So being exposed to sign language, signing exact English, 1 year old, transitioned to American Sign Language, 5th grade. And I've been using American Sign Language ever since.
I will turn off Kaitlyn's and then spotlight John.
Hi, this is John. They knew I was deaf as I was about 1. I learned American Sign Language as a newborn baby, basically, the second that they identified me as deaf. And I've known American Sign Language this whole time. They found out that I had Usher syndrome. So the type of chromosomes I had, my mom had RP. And so that was then that diagnosed me with Usher syndrome pretty quickly.
I will turn off John's screen and spotlight Lolly. Lolly, please unmute.
I'm unmuting. There we go. Okay, this is Lolly. I was diagnosed early as a baby with what they thought was a lack of oxygen. It turned out to be labors, but that diagnosis did not actually happen correctly until I was in my 30s. But my vision loss was evident at birth. And here started in my late 50s and has progressed from mild to moderate over the past 9 years. Thanks.
I'm turning off Lolly. And then I will spotlight Erin.
Hi, this is Erin. I was born blind in one eye, and then at 3 years old, I became deaf in 1 ear. When I was about 13, they found out that I had a brain tumor. So I had surgery, and the doctor said that I had fibrosis disease. So the doctors thought that I had that. And so I had more brain tumors and more surgeries. And so they decided to do radiation. And then more tumors started growing. And then I had NF2. New fibromatosis number 2. So then the main tumor was basically controlling the nerves in my ears and also in my vision. And so through MRIs, then they finally learned that that is why I had a hearing loss and a vision loss. And so I became fully deaf in 2011. I don't remember how old I was. I think probably in my 20s. I identify as deafblind. I did so in my 30s, and then as I grew up deaf, but I didn't know that I was having a vision loss, and I did not grow up. I then later identified as deafblind and then fully blind, and then similar to Helen Keller. And so in my 30s, I thought, but I have a vision loss and a hearing loss. Does that make me deafblind? And I was researching more about it and went to a celebration for North Carolina Relay. And I saw people were wearing shirts that said, North Carolina Deafblind Association. And I said, well, I want to talk with all them. And so I learned about their association and I joined. And so that's when I started identifying as deafblind at around age 36.
Okay, we will turn off Erin's screen. And we'll assign the next question. Maybe it might not be for all. If you're interested in responding, please raise your hand and let me know. The next question is from a person who, if asking any of you have experience using AIRA, A-I-R-A, it's a wayfinding equipment. Do you feel that it's useful? Anybody use it? You can certainly answer that question if you have. I see a hand. Lolly. Do you want me to go ahead and turn it to Lolly or Patrick? Certainly, I will spotlight Lolly just a moment, please. I also would, thank you, I will add that spotlight just a moment. Go ahead, Lolly.
Thank you. This is Lolly. I use IRA every day. And find it to be really useful. I can see where if your primary disability is being hard of hearing or deaf, that it would be a challenge. And I know that they've talked about addressing this, but I use it for a lot of household tasks, for helping with reading things, or I have a medication I have to take right now, which is liquid drops, and I have to count out how many drops I need. And so they're very helpful with that. That's a really quick call, but also just lots of different things. I recently, let's see, I've gone shopping and used them for shopping, although I find that to be more taxing, but it can be done. And it's actually kind of exhilarating sometimes when it works really well. I've used them for navigation. I love it. It's so freeing not to have to ask all the time a neighbor or a family friend or friend for assistance. And it's a life changer for me. Thanks.
I will turn off Lolly's screen. Anybody else like to respond to that question about IRA? I will go ahead and spotlight you. Patrick, I believe you're next. Patrick, go ahead.
Now that I've not used that service mostly because it's based on, well, I would liken it to a remote SSP. It relies on the video to help you provide information. But the problem is then you have to use your ears. And there's currently not really much communication through the text. But one idea that I had when I learned about it in a conference in 2018 is to incorporate the Disney VR vest that they use in some of their shows, where you wear the vest and you can feel the haptic feedback on your body. So if you can incorporate it into Era, the remote quote SSP unquote can provide the PT environmental information on your back through the VR vest. And
Thank you. I'm turning off Patrick's screen. Anybody else like to add, or shall we move on to the last question of the night? I'll move on. We have many, many questions. We will definitely save them and ask the panelists to respond, and then we will send them back out to you. We do have a question here. A person said they're trying to email some deafblind individuals, but sometimes they will get an encrypt message. What's that? Is it a machine that's doing it? Or is it translating the message into Braille? Oftentimes I get a response that says encrypt. What does that mean? Anyone has an interest in responding to that question? Or do you know what that means? Would you like me to repeat the question? Patrick, just a moment. Just a moment, Patrick. Please wait, I will spotlight you. And you are spotlighted. Please say that again.
I just wanted to clarify then, to make sure that I understand. Me as a deafblind individual, you're saying that they are emailing you, and then you're emailing back, and you get that message saying that something is encrypted? Is that the question?
This is Jesslyn here. I'll clarify that. The person, a sighted person, has emailed a deafblind person. But sometimes you'll get that automatic response that says, encrypt the message. Is it a machine that does that?
Is it deciphering?
Is it deciphering or translating that message into Braille?
I don't know Braille, so I don't know what that would do. But I know when folks email me, I don't know if they get an encrypt message, because maybe that's related to security. So I may open that message. Sometimes I have to go in and log in to the system and maybe then open it to a separate system. But I've had that happen with caseworkers from if they're working in other counties and they email me, it's encrypted or it's secured. I can't open it for whatever reason. And we need to make it unsecure, and they have to put in a password to do that. And so some of them will require security and some of them will not.
This is Jesslyn. Thank you. I will turn off Patrick's screen. Anybody else like to add to that question, or should we move on? Let's move on. Another person has asked, making ASL music videos. I'm an artist. I want to provide access to our deafblind folks. How do I provide full access with music videos? black background, white clothing, captioning, but how do I make sure that it's fully accessible for deafblind people? How can I do that? Anybody willing to respond to that? I see Kaitlyn. Just a moment, let me spotlight you.
This is Kaitlyn. That is my field of specialty, actually. I love music and theater and film, all of it. So what you can do is provide various options. So for example, to make things accessible, captions work really well, but captions need to be in the video. They might not be read well by a screen reader if they're embedded into the video. At the same time, YouTube, you can toggle the on off, but that's a separate program that might not be able to be read either. So I suggest adding a transcript, a written English transcript of what's being said. But also transcripts are being provided of what's being said and not heard, but there's no visual description in that transcript. So I suggest adding what we call a visual description in that transcript. So both the captions of what's being said plus the visual description of what's being seen. So that would be the easiest way. Caption the videos first, download, add a visual description of what's being seen. So then that person has various options. Do they want to read the transcript, read the captions, or if it's in sign, they can see it that way as well. For production, I think it depends, but I would recommend if you are using sign language, use contrasting to your skin colors. For example, I'm a white woman, which means you see that I have a dark background and I'm wearing dark clothing. So you can see the signing, it's contrasted to my skin color. So if you are an opposite skin color, then you use opposite clothing. So that's my advice. And if you don't know, then just ask. If something works or doesn't work, are there ways? We will always tell you. I'm happy to work with you to make it work.
Thank you. We'll turn Kaitlyn's video off. We have smiles, a lot of smiles in the environment here. Another question, we have one more minute or so. I have many more that certainly we will collect and respond to. Those of you that ride the bus, do you use braille boards or paper to communicate with the bus driver? Would anybody like to answer that question? No hands at this time. I see Patrick, just a moment, Patrick. And I see Erin, just a moment. Go ahead, Patrick, you are spotlighted.
Okay, so years ago, I would try to use communication cards, but I noticed that sometimes that doesn't always successful, especially most drivers don't necessarily fluent in English. They might be English as a second language. So I'm now using an app to follow the bus and know when to get off, because like the Move It app would vibrate 3 times to stop before, vibrate 2 times to stop before, and vibrate 3 times, it's time to get off. So to stop before, I know to pull the cord, because if you don't pull the cord for the next stop, then the bus will just zoom right by if there's nobody at the bus stop. Oh well, too bad you missed your stop. Sometimes it doesn't always work and I have to walk like 2 miles to get to where I wanted to go. Follow the GPS, especially if I fall asleep. Okay, Erin, your turn.
Just a moment, we'll be turning off Patrick's spotlight. And last is Erin. Just a moment, we'll spotlight you. You are spotlighted.
Hi, this is Erin. Right now, I don't use the bus. Because they won't write back and forth with me. I've tried that. And I've tried pointing to write back and forth with me, but they don't. They just refuse. Most of the time when I try to use the bus, I will miss my stop. Basically, almost every time I will miss my stop. And so there's a loop that the bus route goes to downtown, and it's free. So I will look and I will say, please let me know when you're stopping at this specific location. And they say, okay. And then I sit down. And so I watch the driver. And so I'll keep an eye on them for them to alert me. And then they just forget. I think, or maybe they yell and I can't hear it. So I have to ride that loop several times, 3 more times before I find out when they're finally going to stop. And then I get off. But then I can't do what I want to do because I'm always late. And that was the last time I used the bus.
Thank you, Erin. I'll be turning off your spotlight at this time. I would like to add Patrick and Kaitlyn. Will you please, we'll spotlight you so we can close our workshop. Patrick, you are spotlighted.
Okay.
Kaitlyn, you
Before I
are.
close, I just want to give a fast comment. Yes. So if the DeafBlind is taking orientation and mobility training with the instructor, oftentimes the bus driver is on their best behavior because the instructor can see the driver's name. And if they don't do it, but they're supposed to do, then the instructor can report them. But if the DeafBlind is by themselves, then, excuse me, but the driver often doesn't care. And they won't be on their best behavior and follow those things. But now it's time to close. So let me check my time. Oh boy, sorry. Shut up, Steven. It's past 8, so we'll hurry and close. Thank you all, the interpreters and DRI, my tactile interpreters, CARD, and other service providers tonight. We will compile all the questions into an FAQ and blast it out to the people who registered. Kaitlyn, you want to have final remarks?
We just want to thank our PBS viewers. As all the PBS, we want to thank all of our viewers. Thank you to the panelists as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go ahead and close. And we, again, will save the chat and we will compile an FAQ so the panelists can answer the questions that the participants had. And we can send it with the recording and with the participant list. We will send that out to them.